The shopping cart slowly moves down the supermarket aisle. At first glance, it seems like a common decision. A protein bar goes into the cart, then a whole grain cereal, a zero-fat yogurt, a fit snack, a vitamin-enriched drink. In a few minutes, the feeling is one of mission accomplished. After all, everything there seems to have been chosen with health in mind. The packaging helps build this impression. Shades of green, white, and beige predominate. Illustrated leaves suggest naturalness. Words like fitness, protein, natural, high in fiber, sugar-free, whole grain, and high in protein appear prominently, almost always accompanied by images of people exercising or living a healthy lifestyle. But there's a question few people ask before putting these products in their cart. Are these packages describing the food or telling a carefully constructed story to convince you to buy it? This difference may seem small. In practice, it drives a multi-billion-dollar market worldwide. In recent years, there has never been so much concern about healthy eating. Millions of people have started reading headlines about nutrition, following specialized influencers, seeking more balanced diets, and swapping traditional products for versions considered healthier. At the same time, the food industry has noticed this change in behavior. If before advertising only highlighted taste or practicality, now it sells well-being, longevity, physical performance, and quality of life. Food has ceased to be just food. It has come to represent an identity. Buying a certain product can convey a sense of discipline. Another seems to indicate self-care. Some promise energy. Others suggest weight loss, muscle gain, or a more balanced life. But do all these messages reflect what is really inside the packaging? The answer begins with an extremely powerful psychological phenomenon. Our brain makes thousands of decisions every day using mental shortcuts. They save time and energy. When we see a product with a sophisticated appearance, colors associated with nature, or words that refer to health, we tend to believe, almost automatically, that it is also nutritionally superior. This process happens so quickly that we rarely notice it. In fact, we often decide that a food is healthy even before looking at the ingredient list or the nutritional information. And this doesn't happen because we're inattentive. It happens because our brains evolved to rely on quick signals when it needs to make decisions in information-rich environments. The industry has known this behavior for decades. There's an entire area dedicated to understanding how colors, shapes, words, images, and even the weight of packaging influence consumer perception. In other words, even before the first bite, an important part of the experience has already been carefully planned. But here's a detail that completely changes this story. Not every nutritional claim is misleading. There are products genuinely developed to offer more protein, less sodium, higher fiber content, or other specific benefits. Many of them can be part of a balanced diet. The problem arises when a single positive characteristic makes the consumer believe that the entire food is healthy. That's exactly where one of the most sophisticated strategies of modern marketing begins. Throughout this investigation, we will discover how the fitness food market was born, why our brains are so easily influenced by packaging, what science has discovered about consumer behavior, and, most importantly, how to differentiate nutritional information from sales strategy. Because perhaps the biggest surprise isn't discovering that some packaging exaggerates its benefits. The real surprise is realizing that often we aren't even buying food. We are buying the idea of who we would like to be. And understanding how this idea was constructed requires going back a few decades, to a time when the word fitness wasn't even part of most people's vocabulary. For much of the 20th century, choosing food was a much simpler decision than it is today. Supermarket shelves offered fewer options. Most products were sold without elaborate promises of health, physical performance, or well-being. Consumers bought bread because it was bread, milk because it was milk, yogurt because it was yogurt. Advertising existed, but the focus was different. Advertisements highlighted flavor, tradition, price, or convenience. Little was said about proteins, antioxidants, probiotics, or glycemic index. Food had not yet become a symbol of lifestyle. This change began to gain momentum from the second half of the 20th century. As science advanced, researchers began to better understand the relationship between diet and chronic diseases. Studies showed that dietary patterns influenced the risk of cardiovascular problems, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and other health conditions. At the same time, governments began to create nutritional recommendations to guide the population. Dietary guidelines, educational campaigns, and rules for product labeling emerged. It was an important advance. But there was an unexpected effect. The food industry realized that health could also become a powerful selling point. If before it was enough to convince someone that a food was tasty, now it was possible to convince them that the product also represented a smart choice. This is how entire product categories were born. First came light foods. The proposal was simple: reduce some component of the original product, such as calories, fat, or sugar, following criteria defined by law. Shortly after, diet products gained popularity, initially created to meet specific needs, such as those of people with diabetes or other conditions requiring dietary restrictions. Over time, many consumers began to interpret diet as synonymous with healthy food or weight loss, although that was not necessarily its objective. In the following decades, new words began to appear on packaging: whole grain, natural, source of fiber, lactose-free, gluten-free, sugar-free, high protein, fitness. Each of these highlighted a specific characteristic of the product, and in many cases, this characteristic was true. A food may, in fact, have a higher protein content. Another may contain less sodium. A third may truly be a source of fiber. The problem arose when this information began to be used to create a much broader impression than what it actually meant. Science calls this phenomenon the halo effect. It works like what happens in relationships between people. When someone makes an excellent first impression, our brain tends to automatically attribute other positive qualities, even without sufficient evidence. Something similar happens with food. If packaging highlights a favorable characteristic, many consumers unconsciously conclude that the entire product is healthy, even if it contains large amounts of sugar, even if it is high in sodium, even if it has a long list of highly processed ingredients. This association did not arise by chance. It was carefully studied. From the 1980s and 1990s onwards, food marketing began to incorporate knowledge from consumer psychology. Companies invested in research to understand how small details modified people's perception. They discovered, for example, that certain colors evoked specific associations. Green came to refer to nature, white suggested purity, blue conveyed trust, gold indicated premium quality. Photographs of fresh ingredients made the product seem less industrialized, even when these ingredients appeared in small quantities in the formula. Words also began to be chosen with enormous care. Curiously, many of them do not even have an official nutritional definition. The term fitness, for example, often conveys an idea of health and good shape, but its use by itself does not guarantee that the food is nutritionally superior. The same applies to expressions like well-being, balance, or healthy life, which evoke positive emotions without necessarily describing the product's composition. Meanwhile, another phenomenon was growing rapidly. Gyms were becoming popular. Interest in sports was increasing. Body culture was gaining strength. Protein became almost a symbol of health. Foods began to be associated not only with taste, but also with physical performance, appearance, and even personal success. It was in this environment that the enormous market for so-called fitness foods emerged. Protein bars, protein cookies, protein ice cream, protein cereals, protein breads, protein yogurts. Even products traditionally seen as indulgent began to gain versions that promised to combine pleasure and health. Some really do present important nutritional differences. Others change very little beyond the packaging and communication strategy. And here's a fascinating detail. From the consumer's point of view, these differences are not always easy to perceive. Most people shop in a hurry. They glance quickly at the front of the packaging. They read one or two highlighted words. They trust appearances. People rarely turn the product over to analyze the complete list of ingredients. And this doesn't happen because of a lack of intelligence. It happens because the human brain needs to simplify decisions. Imagine analyzing in detail each of the hundreds of products in a supermarket. It would be practically impossible. That's why we use mental shortcuts. They work very well most of the time, but they can also be exploited by extremely sophisticated marketing strategies. It was precisely trying to understand these shortcuts that psychologists, nutritionists, and behavioral scientists began to conduct curious experiments. The results showed that a simple word printed on the packaging can alter how we perceive the taste, the number of calories, and even the feeling of satiety. It is at this point that the investigation becomes even more surprising. Because the greatest influence of marketing may not be in the food itself, it may be happening within our own minds. Imagine that two people receive exactly the same food. The product is identical, same recipe, same number of calories, same ingredients. The only difference is the packaging. On the first one, the word fitness appears, along with a green leaf and phrases like rich in protein and healthy choice. In the second scenario, there is no reference to health, only the product name. Now the question arises, which one will believe they are consuming something healthier? Several studies in consumer psychology show that most of the time the answer is predictable. The simple presence of certain words, colors, or symbols can profoundly alter people's perception of a food, even when its composition remains exactly the same. This phenomenon has been given a name, the health halo effect. The human brain works through associations. When it identifies a positive characteristic, it tends to expand that impression to other aspects that may not even be related to it. It's like meeting someone very well dressed and, without realizing it, assuming that this person is also more competent, more organized, or more trustworthy. Appearance creates an expectation that influences the rest of the evaluation. Something very similar happens with food. If a product highlights that it is a source of fiber, many people conclude that it must also have little sugar, few calories, and an excellent nutritional composition. But one piece of information does not automatically guarantee the others. Similarly, a food can actually be rich in protein and, at the same time, contain large amounts of sugar, saturated fat, or sodium. The presence of a favorable characteristic does not by itself transform the entire product. Another common example involves the expression zero sugar. For many consumers, this phrase automatically means healthier. However, it only informs that the product meets the criteria for that specific claim. This alone does not allow one to conclude that it is nutritionally superior in all aspects. Depending on the formulation, there may be important differences in relation to fat content, sodium, sweeteners, or the degree of processing. The same applies to gluten-free. For people with celiac disease or other specific medical conditions, this information is essential. But for those without a clinical indication, a gluten-free food is not necessarily more nutritious than one that contains gluten. Still, the brain often interprets these expressions as a general seal of quality. This is one of the mental shortcuts most exploited by modern marketing. Packaging also speaks a silent language. Few consumers realize that practically nothing on a label is placed there by chance. Green usually refers to nature. Brown suggests artisanal or whole grain foods. White conveys purity. Images of fields, farms, and leaves evoke a feeling of freshness. Textures that mimic recycled paper suggest sustainability and naturalness. Even when food is produced on a highly automated industrial line, these visual elements can create a completely different perception. There is another fascinating detail. Research in consumer behavior indicates that people tend to consume larger portions when they believe a particular food is healthy. It seems contradictory, but it makes sense from a psychological point of view. When something receives the mental label of allowed, we feel less guilt about consuming larger quantities. This behavior has been observed in different contexts and helps explain why the perception of healthiness can influence not only the purchase, but also the amount ingested. Another little-known aspect involves the order of information on the packaging. The front is carefully designed to capture attention in a few seconds. That's where the most attractive messages appear. The list of ingredients is usually on the back, in smaller print, requiring a conscious decision from the consumer to consult it. This happens because our brain prefers quick answers. When faced with dozens of products, we rarely analyze every detail. We make visual comparisons, identify familiar words, and make decisions in a matter of seconds. The industry knows this behavior intimately, and there's nothing illegal about it. Companies use communication strategies to highlight the true characteristics of their products, as long as they respect the standards established by regulatory bodies. The challenge arises when consumers interpret these messages as a complete assessment of nutritional quality, even if they only refer to a specific aspect. This is precisely why nutrition experts insist on a seemingly simple but extremely important idea. No food should be evaluated solely by the front of the packaging. Nutritional claims are only part of the story. The complete composition can tell a very different narrative, and there's a detail that makes this analysis even more interesting. Some products considered ultra-processed have true nutritional claims. At the same time, some minimally processed foods don't even advertise their qualities. An apple doesn't have the phrase rich in fiber on its peel. Beans don't need to highlight that they provide minerals. Eggs don't display a label saying they contain high biological value proteins. The simplest foods usually don't need to convince anyone that they are healthy. Many industrialized products, however, depend precisely on this communication to gain shelf space. This doesn't mean that all processed foods should be avoided, or that every product with nutritional claims is inadequate. The reality is much more complex. There are processed foods that can be part of a balanced diet. There are products formulated for specific needs. There are important differences between categories and between brands. The real challenge is learning to distinguish marketing from nutritional information. And it was precisely this question that led researchers to investigate consumer behavior in supermarkets. The results showed something surprising. Many people believe they are making choices based on science when, in fact, they are responding to stimuli carefully planned by the psychology of consumption. But after all, what does science really say about these foods? How to separate sales strategies from scientific evidence? And what is the most reliable way to evaluate a product before putting it in the shopping cart? This is the investigation that begins now. If there were a single rule capable of instantly identifying a healthy food, shopping would be much simpler. You would just have to look for a specific word on the packaging, or always choose the product with the most protein, or avoid any food that contains sugar. But after decades of research, science has reached a very different conclusion. The quality of a food can hardly be summarized by a single characteristic. This discovery seems obvious, but it has profoundly changed how nutritionists, researchers, and public health agencies evaluate food. For a long time, the focus was on isolated nutrients. First came fat. Fat-free products dominated supermarket shelves in several countries during the 1980s and 1990s. Many consumers came to believe that removing fat automatically made any food healthier. The result was curious. In many cases, to maintain flavor and texture, manufacturers increased the amount of refined sugars, starches, or other ingredients. The product did have less fat, but that didn't mean its overall nutritional quality had improved. A few years later, the focus shifted again. Protein took center stage. Today, it's possible to find added protein in foods that, until recently, no one would have imagined. Chocolates, ice cream, cookies, breakfast cereals, desserts, ready-made coffees, and even candies. There's a reason for this. Protein is an important nutrient. It participates in the construction and maintenance of tissues, the production of enzymes, hormones, and countless other bodily functions. Furthermore, it often contributes to a greater feeling of satiety compared to some other nutrients. These benefits are real, but science makes an important caveat. Adding protein to a food does not automatically transform its entire composition. A protein cookie remains a cookie. A protein bar remains a bar. Depending on the formulation, these products may contain high amounts of sugars, fats, sodium, or highly processed ingredients. In some cases, they represent an interesting option within certain routines. In others, the nutritional difference compared to the conventional version is small. This is precisely why researchers advocate for an analysis of the food as a whole. Another concept has gained strength in recent years: the dietary pattern. Instead of asking if a single product is healthy, science has begun to investigate which food combinations are associated with better health outcomes over time. The results show a consistent trend. Dietary patterns rich in fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, nuts, seeds, fish, and other minimally processed food sources are associated with a lower risk of various chronic diseases when compared to patterns based predominantly on ultra-processed products. This does not mean that a single food determines someone's health. The body responds to the set of habits repeated over years. This is perhaps one of the most important differences between science and marketing. Marketing sells products. Science studies patterns. While packaging highlights a specific ingredient, researchers seek to understand how the entire diet influences the body throughout life. It was precisely this reasoning that drove important changes in nutritional labeling in several countries. Regulatory bodies realized that many consumers had difficulty interpreting complex tables. The solution was to create more visible information systems. In Brazil, for example, front-of-pack nutritional labeling began to highlight when a food has a high content of added sugars, saturated fat, or sodium, making it easier to identify characteristics that deserve attention. This measure doesn't automatically classify a food as good or bad, but it provides additional information to support more informed choices. At the same time, the ingredient list remains one of the most important tools for understanding a product's composition. There's a detail many people are unaware of. Ingredients are listed in descending order of quantity. This means that the first items on the list correspond to the components present in the largest proportion. If sugar, syrups, refined flours, or other ingredients appear early on, this information helps to better understand the nature of the food, regardless of the messages highlighted on the front of the packaging. Another aspect investigated by science concerns the degree of processing. Researchers have observed that ultra-processed foods share some common characteristics. They often have extensive ingredient lists, a combination of added substances to modify flavor, texture, or preservation, and high convenience of consumption. This doesn't mean that all ultra-processed foods are the same, nor that all should be eliminated from the diet. But population studies have shown that dietary patterns with a high proportion of these products tend to be associated with worse health indicators. Therefore, various dietary guidelines recommend consuming them in moderation, giving preference to unprocessed or minimally processed foods whenever possible. Another interesting point involves nutritional claims. When a label states that a certain food is a source of fiber or rich in protein, this information must meet the criteria defined by law. In other words, the claim itself may be true. What it doesn't do is summarize the entire nutritional quality of the product. It's like judging a book by its cover alone. The cover may provide accurate information about the work, but it will never tell the whole story. Perhaps this is the main scientific discovery about fitness foods. The problem is rarely a single word printed on the packaging. The problem arises when that single word replaces a more complete analysis. And, curiously, this substitution happens because we live in an environment where making quick decisions has become a necessity. Few people have time to compare dozens of labels during a purchase. Few can analyze nutritional tables in detail. It is precisely in this scenario that marketing finds its greatest ally: haste. Understanding how it influences our choices is essential to discovering why so many consumers continue to believe they are buying health, when often they are only buying a very well-presented promise. If there is one place where science and marketing compete for the consumer's attention, that place is the supermarket. And the competition begins even before you touch any product. Research on consumer behavior shows that many purchasing decisions are made in a few seconds. In an aisle with hundreds of options, the brain needs to choose quickly. Reading the detailed nutritional information on each package would be practically impossible. So it does what it has always done throughout evolution. It looks for shortcuts, a familiar color, a known word, a symbol that inspires confidence, a recognized brand. These small signals reduce the mental effort required to decide. That's why packaging is so carefully planned. Nothing is there by chance. The product's position on the shelf, the font size, the photograph of the ingredients, the packaging's shine, the choice of colors, and even the shape of the box are all subject to studies in design, psychology, and marketing. The goal is not just to inform, it's to attract attention amidst dozens of competitors. Imagine walking into an aisle with 50 different cereal bars. You probably won't compare them one by one. Your brain will quickly eliminate most options and focus attention on a few packages that seem more trustworthy or more aligned with your goal. This process happens almost automatically. Another important factor is the pace of modern life. After a day of work, traffic, family commitments, and dozens of accumulated decisions, few people arrive at the supermarket with the mental energy to analyze every detail of the products. This phenomenon is known in psychology as decision fatigue. The more choices we make throughout the day, the greater the tendency to resort to quick and intuitive decisions. It is precisely at this moment that expressions like fit, natural, whole grain, or high in protein gain even more strength. They function as ready-made answers to a question we don't always have time to investigate. Can I trust this product? But the supermarket is no longer the only place where these choices happen. Today, even before reaching the shelves, many consumers have already been exposed to hundreds of messages about food on social media. Influencers show their routines. Athletes appear consuming certain products. Short videos promise to reveal the best foods for weight loss or the healthiest snacks on the market. In just a few seconds, a brand stops selling just food. It starts selling belonging. When an admired content creator appears consuming a product, some of that person's credibility can be transferred to the brand. This effect is well known in advertising and helps explain why partnerships with influencers have become so common. This doesn't mean that every recommendation is incorrect. Many professionals share serious, evidence-based information. The challenge is that on social media, science and marketing often occupy the same visual space. For the viewer, it's not always easy to discern where technical guidance ends and a commercial strategy begins. There's another characteristic of modern communication. It favors simple messages. Sugar-free, zero, high in protein, natural. These expressions are easy to remember and share. Concepts like nutritional density, dietary patterns, food processing, and diet context require longer explanations. The brain naturally prefers simplicity. The problem is that nutrition is rarely simple. Another very common behavior occurs at home. A person decides to improve their diet and swaps regular soda for zero-calorie soda, traditional cookies for fitness cookies, and conventional chocolate for protein chocolate. These substitutions may make sense in certain contexts, but there is a psychological risk. The feeling of already making healthy choices can reduce attention to the rest of the diet. This is called moral licensing. After making a decision considered positive, people tend to feel they have earned a kind of credit to relax in other choices. It's like someone who exercises in the morning and unconsciously feels they deserve to overindulge in dessert at night. Something similar happens with food. When a product conveys a strong image of health, some people start consuming it with less critical thinking or in larger quantities, believing it offers few risks. But there is an even deeper aspect. Food also communicates identity. A few decades ago, buying food was primarily a necessity. Today, many food choices say something about who we are or who we would like to be. Someone buys organic food because they value sustainability. Another prefers protein products because they do weight training. Some people choose lactose-free foods out of medical necessity, while others do so believing they represent a healthier lifestyle. These motivations are legitimate. The challenge arises when identity begins to replace the objective analysis of the food's composition. The packaging ceases to sell just a product. It sells belonging, it sells discipline, it sells youth, it sells performance, it sells well-being. And the more emotional this connection is, the less willing we tend to be to question it. Perhaps this is the most sophisticated strategy of modern marketing. It doesn't just try to convince you that a food is good. It seeks to convince you that that food represents the person you want to be. But there's good news. As soon as we understand how these mechanisms work, we stop being passive consumers. We start asking better questions. And better questions lead to better choices. The question ceases to be, does this packaging look healthy? And becomes, what does this product really offer my body? Answering this question requires only a few minutes of learning, and these small changes can completely transform how you view food from now on. After understanding how marketing influences our choices, an inevitable question arises. If we can't rely solely on the front of the packaging, then how do we practically identify whether a food really deserves a place in our shopping cart? The good news is that this doesn't require memorizing complex nutrition tables. Most of the time, it's enough to change the order of the questions. Instead of starting with the highlighted information in large letters on the front of the packaging, start with what it almost never draws attention to: the ingredient list. It acts as the food's identity. While advertising tries to tell a story, the list reveals what that product is really made of. There's an extremely important detail. The ingredients appear in descending order of quantity. This means that the first items on the list represent the largest part of the composition. If the first ingredients are familiar foods, such as oats, milk, peanuts, cocoa, or fruits, you already begin to better understand the nature of that product. If, on the other hand, the first items listed are different types of sugars, syrups, refined flours, or a long sequence of unfamiliar ingredients, it's worth looking at the food more closely. The second step is to look at the nutritional information without focusing on just a single number. Many people only look at calories. Others only check the amount of protein. Some only look for the fat content. But none of these data points, in isolation, tells the whole story. Ideally, you should look at the whole picture. What is the amount of fiber? How much sodium does this food provide? Is there a large amount of added sugars? How does this portion fit into the rest of your diet throughout the day? These questions offer a much more complete view than focusing on just one nutrient. Another simple habit is to pay attention to front-of-package labeling. When a product displays warnings about high levels of added sugars, saturated fat, or sodium, this information deserves to be considered. It doesn't mean the food needs to be completely excluded from your diet, but it helps contextualize your choice. Perhaps the most important lesson is to abandon the idea that there are foods that are entirely good or entirely bad. Nutrition science is much more interesting than that. It shows that the impact of a food depends on the frequency of consumption, the quantity, the context of the diet, and individual needs. A protein biscuit consumed occasionally for convenience does not define the quality of a person's diet. Similarly, consuming a single piece of fruit on a single day does not automatically transform an unbalanced diet into a healthy one. It's the combination that makes the difference. Another principle that helps avoid pitfalls is to ask a very simple question when faced with any packaging. If this phrase were removed from the front of the product, would I still choose this food after reading its composition? This question completely changes the perspective. It forces the consumer to separate marketing from information. It's also worth remembering that many of the most nutritious foods hardly advertise themselves. Fruits don't display labels saying they are sources of vitamin C. Beans don't emblazon rich in fiber in giant letters. Eggs don't need to highlight that they offer high-quality protein. Vegetables don't compete for advertising space. They simply remain food. This doesn't mean that processed foods should be rejected. They are part of modern life and, in many contexts, offer practicality, safety, and convenience. There are well-formulated options, products designed for specific needs, and categories that can be part of a balanced diet. The difference lies in not allowing the packaging to make the decision for you. Throughout this investigation, we discovered that the true power of marketing is not in inventing false information. It lies in carefully choosing which information to show first: a single word, a single color, a single photograph. Sometimes, this is enough to build a completely different perception of the nutritional reality of the food. But now that packaging no longer seems so mysterious, you know it was designed to grab your attention. You know that a nutritional claim can be true without summarizing the entire quality of the product. You know that seemingly similar foods can have completely different compositions. And, above all, you know that the best decision almost never comes from impulse. It comes from information. Perhaps this is the greatest discovery of this documentary. Marketing is not the enemy. It is part of any market. The problem begins when we let it replace our critical thinking. Science doesn't ask you to distrust everything. She simply invites you to look beyond first impressions, because health isn't summed up in a single word printed on the packaging. It's built by the dietary patterns we repeat every day, by the choices made throughout the weeks, by the variety of foods we put on our plates, and by the ability to distinguish a sales promise from scientific evidence. The next time you're faced with a shelf full of fit products, do a little experiment. Ignore, for a few seconds, everything written on the front of the packaging. Turn the product over. Read the list of ingredients. Look at the nutritional information. Ask yourself, am I buying this food for what it really is or for the image it conveys? This single question can completely transform the way you shop. And often, the smartest choices aren't the ones that attract the most attention. They're the ones that continue to make sense even when the marketing stops talking. If this documentary has changed the way you see fitness foods, tell us in the comments which packaging has most deceived you, or which information caught your attention the most. Share this video with someone who always believes that fit is synonymous with healthy. Perhaps this conversation will help more people make choices based on information and not just impressions. If you enjoy content that combines science, food, and research, please like and subscribe to the channel. This way, you can follow upcoming documentaries about health, metabolism, and the behind the scenes of the food industry. And in the next episode, we'll investigate another question that divides experts and consumers. Are all ultra-processed foods the same? Or are there differences that almost no one notices? Thank you for watching until the end. Until the next investigation.